you find the right people, not the best people, but if you find the right people and they are really, really, really good at the basics, there's almost nothing they can't do in that domain. High performance is personal, and that's 100% how I look like it now. Don't concern yourself with what I used to do and think that's high performance. That's crap. Plan and prioritize movement. Plan and prioritize sleep. Plan and prioritize eating in a way that I have good energy.
CrossFit over the years, especially, non-military folks, kind of ended up getting a bit of a bad name because it was kind of like what people did to get hurt. But that definitely that hasn't been my experience. Mostly I found that it taught virtuosity. It forced you to learn a bunch of things that you probably didn't know or have a lot of experience with. So it kind of kept you being like a lifelong constant learner and helped you to be way more well-rounded. And it sounds like that was the kind of an experience that you had too. It's something that kind of kept you being consistent and helped you to learn to do things correctly.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like that virtuosity component of, hey, get really good at doing something that people think, oh, if I do this, a couple times, oh, I've got this down. No, actually you don't. And that's a huge concept in I call my framework the Better Basics framework, because there's and we can get into that later, but I just find that if you aren't doing the basics well, I don't care about your pre-workout concoction. I don't care about your cold plunge. I don't care about, grounding if you're not doing the basics of what I consider personal performance stuff first. All that other stuff is great to add on later, but kind of useless to start with.
Yeah. I'm a major proponent of that. I think that people who are elite at anything, and you can name the field, I don't care if they're a poet, I don't care if they're, in the military, I don't care if they're an accountant. The people who are elite really learn how to master the basics. They become extremely uncommonly good at the basics. And I'm curious if you find that to be true and how you've kind of incorporated that into your the 4 pillars of your training program now.
It's 100% true. If I get an opportunity to talk to any group, whether it's talking about leadership or team building or whatever, I'm like, if you find the right people, not the best people, but if you find the right people and they gel and they are really, really, really good at the basics, there's almost nothing they can't do in that domain where they're looking to achieve virtuosity. And I mean, we do it. There's so many examples across everything in kind of the performance space. From a military standpoint, as a military, high-end military, whatever person doing, you name it, shooting, jumping, explosives work at the highest level, you always come right back to, from a shooting standpoint, somebody just goes and wins a match. What are they doing Monday morning on the range? They're doing 25-meter slow fire drills with a pistol with iron sights. It's like, I'm really good at this level because I spend so much time mastering things at this level. And even in LURS, we could go do some crazy operations even back in the 90s from a training standpoint, like some wazoo stuff, because we had the basics, we had fitness, we had communication, we had movement through the woods. So it was like, okay, well now we're gonna go and we're gonna jump into JRTC and do a full profile combat training mission with Live Op 4 and be successful because we weren't worried about, working a compass, for lack of a better example, to get to where we needed to put our hide sight in.
Yeah, that actually, this kind of makes me think of something I read in your blog that's super interesting to me. You talk about this term adventure ready, right? And that's something that you kind of talk to your clients and everything about. And it sounds to me like what we're talking about right now, kind of getting the basics down to a high, doing the basics uncommonly well, helps you to be ready for all these other things in your life. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that concept a little.
Yeah. Sure. And kind of where we've been talking most of the time, people are probably thinking about like these big physical things. So my four buckets are eat, sleep, move, think. When I'm talking about getting the basics right on eating, it's, when you eat, what you eat, and how much you eat, and how, so there's some basic principles under those three sub paragraphs, if you will, like, why having a shorter food clock helps with gut health and also metabolic flexibility, and even helps you sleep based on that gap at the end, as an example of something. But when I'm talking about my better basics, I'm talking about sleep. So everything else we're kind of talking about, you think about these big adventure ready things. Oh, I did this 24-hour ultra marathon competition. Obviously, there's nothing to do with sleep there. But if you weren't sleeping right before that competition, you're not maximizing the basics of proper sleep, i.e., the environment, the pre-bed rituals, and then what I call the clocks, which is your master clock, or how you interact with light throughout the day. I think Brian Johnson, I stole his term and modified it a little bit, or it might be exact, but that electronic sunset, like when you shut down electronics at a certain point of the day before bed. And then the third one is that food clock. Buddy of mine that I also have in my Better Basics course right now, Better Basics program. He was just telling me about he went to a nonprofit event and they had a very late meal. He had this massive steak, no alcohol, no nothing. And just this steak wrecked his sleep because it was
Oh man,
much closer to bedtime than when he normally would finish eating. And I mean, we laugh at the Whoop data. I'm like, man, that looks like a 3 margarita night. And he's like, no, it was a 16-ounce bone-in ribeye. I'm like, interesting, So we're not talking about like racing across the country or jumping out of airplanes or anything. We're talking about like the high performance effect of getting good sleep, which in the military, I totally had the Reagan, Thatcher, Trump, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of mindset for years and years and years. And I've been working on sleep pretty hard, especially thinking about brain health. And, like the one place mentally that I don't want to end up if I make it long enough on this earth is now I'm like, more than anything, I want to make sure my brain, my cognitive ability stays as solid as possible. Well, what's one of the primary ways to guarantee that? It's sleep. So my sleep basics are huge. The third one's movement, and kind of back to that wow moment for me. Moving all day as an infantry guy or a special operations person on the active side of those roles, that's, you didn't even think about it. It's like asking, that common analogy of asking a fish about the water. They're like, what's water? We didn't have to think about moving all day. We were up and down off of the ranges and like there was just constant movement and usually a normal, very robust workout opportunity each day. Fast forward to corporate America and it's like, okay, I made it on time to the CrossFit gym 4 times this week, but day in and day out, I'm very sedentary because I'm tied to this desk. And that wasn't the case initially because I was rebuilding a program and I was the only person in the program. So I got to do all the physical labor components of executive protection. But that quickly changed as I built out the team. And even as a security guy, you get to move around office buildings and traveling the spaces you're in, traveling and stuff a lot more than a regular, say, finance person. But it's like, I call it CrossFit sloth because I talk to people all the time. I'm like, tell me about your workout. Oh man, I work out 6 days a week, 5 CrossFit, and then I play 2 hours of pickup soccer on Saturday. I'm like, what do you do besides those workouts during the week? Tell me about the rest of your day. How much movement is it? It's pretty much all sedentary. And I'm like, let's talk about what you can do every time your Zoom call ends, even if you only have 5 minutes before the next one starts. Like with what, I'm sure you've heard the term, they're calling them exercise snacks now. So, hey, can I do some exercise snacks? Can I just get up and do some Superman stretches at my desk regularly? Can I just get in the bottom of a squat by my desk and hold it, just get nice and comfy in that, that nice bottom of the squat position, even if the form isn't great, just touching those endpoints on movement. And so much of my passion around helping people with what I call personal performance, again, those things that because of where I worked before and where I was not even really having to pay attention or think about things, where I'm trying to help people now. I think having in the movement bucket, I think having a good, I call it play and train. Like, I want you to have a good training plan, that maybe is seasonal, because it also includes the sports you love to play as a kid, where you're playing that with your kids, or you're playing pickup. Because I live in Colorado now, and I could probably within an hour be signed up for a volleyball, or excuse me, like an adult dodgeball group if I wanted to be for the winter. As the leaves are turning and we're getting the indicators that snow will be here soon. So, like, all that's hugely important as a small component of moving all day, in my opinion. And how do you do that if you're in an office environment or whatever? So that's the things that I think about now, and try to help people reset their apertures on what matters, and kind of redesign and redefine how they're thinking about performance.
Yeah, I think performance is a really interesting thing, and I think the problem that, like, you're bumping up against with these, like, these people in the corporate world, these high achievers in the corporate world, they're so what? Their purpose isn't largely, most of the time, tied to their physical abilities. There's not like a direct link to that. As a guy in special
Mm-hmm.
operations, clearly your survival oftentimes, and the survival of your buddies oftentimes, depended on, how physically, mentally, what was your fitness like, and I think that's a tough thing when you're working with civilians, is helping them to realize how much of their purpose and their performance is still tied to their physical fitness. They just don't see it, and I'm wondering if you're finding that you spent 25 years training warriors, and now you're jumping into the world of training, corporate executives and other folks like that. I'm wondering, are you seeing a major difference in how you're having to train them and how you're approaching the training itself?
I wouldn't say I'm seeing a major difference, because I really wasn't too deeply involved with the actual training as I'm approaching it now when I was in the military. Again, it was like asking a fish how the water was then. It was like, there were always competitions. How fast can you get through the O course? Which are, if we had this one test called the UBRR, and it gave you a score, like a number, 1107 or 958. And so you could just stack up against your buddies and be like, I kicked your ass. It had nothing to do with how well you ate the day before, or if you bothered to even sleep. You know what I mean? So actually, I do interact with some military people now and some retired folks, and they need this same kind of, hey, give me a simple to follow starting point plan that I can start feeling more energy, and I can start improving my body composition, and I can start thinking more clearly. And I mean, all these metrics now, they're kind of the same, but it's just like the way I describe it. I wrote a piece, gosh, it's a blog probably from more than 3 years ago, but defining high performance. And I found a picture of a commando, like all like gunned up, totally kitted out. And I had this lady standing there, and I'm like, who's the higher performer? And of course, anybody that comes from our neck of the woods is going to go, oh, the guy that looks like a Navy SEAL is the high performer. And I'm like, well, not so fast, because this lady, maybe she's a corporate real estate executive, and based on the requirements of a corporate real estate executive, she's crushing life. She's able to do everything she needs to do at work. She has an amazing family life because she comes home with plenty of energy and plenty of cognitive capacity left in her day. And, her relationships are amazing. She's amazing from a family standpoint. She's amazing at her job. And the Navy SEAL might look, or the guy, the commando all dressed up in his kit, like he might look really cool in that picture, but, he's not sleeping. He eats like crap. He's a rage machine, but he looks really good in that uniform. So, in my goal with that blog was high performance is personal, and that's 100% how I look like it now, or how I look at it now. And that's one of the first documents I send my clients. I'm like, hey, don't concern yourself with what I used to do and think that's high performance. That's crap. I'm just like my clients now. I'm in my basement office right now. I have to plan and prioritize movement just the way I just described it to you. I have to plan and prioritize sleep. I have to plan and prioritize eating in a way that I have good energy, and I'm like able to maintain the body composition that I feel really good. When I left LURS and made it through selection, this is how goofy some things happen in your mind. You're like, well, man, if I'm going there, I'm going to get on creatine. I need to be 10 pounds heavier. And, I started talking to some of my new cadre when I got there, and they're like, what are you talking about? Look around. You're not the biggest guy here, but you're not the smallest guy here. Like, you're fighting weight. And so I kind of was like, I guess that was kind of stupid of me to get those medium BDUs. I'll go turn them back in and get my smalls. And to think that I was going to gain 10 pounds of muscle, it was just like some of the ridiculous things that happen in young men's brains in their 20s, So yeah, my fighting weight has pretty much been 165 pounds. The only time I really got bigger than that was, you'll like this story. So I went to Ranger School in 1993. The day I finished the Florida stress phase, I just happened to weigh in before the dog X started. I weighed 132 pounds. 3 weeks later to the day, I weighed 182 pounds. I gained 50 pounds in 3 weeks. And I was just had
No
fat
way.
hanging off of me. Yeah, but I was 23. So it took a few months, and, got back into training we were prepping for this thing called the Cambrian Patrol over in Wales. And that train up just caused my metabolism and everything to be like, oh, we're back to kind of how we used to operate, and everything came back online. And I waffled off so much there. I don't even know where we started, but hopefully I answered your question if there was
No,
one.
yeah, it definitely answered the question. And like, I love where you're going with it, because you're 100% right. Like, one of the tenets of this show, and like who I think I am for people, is helping them to find optimal habits, right? And optimal is individual, and those habits that you do might even be different. So what you have to find first is, how do I, what's my purpose? What is it that I want to become elite at? And then you can reverse engineer, what do these habits look like? There's the basics that everybody needs to do, you've already talked about, but there might be some, to what extent you do each of those basics, and some other habits and things that you might add in are going to vary, depending on the person. And I think you touched on that beautifully, kind of comparing and contrasting what someone who in special operations might do compared to somebody who, like you mentioned, is a corporate real estate agent. So
Yeah.
I am curious about. So another thing that's huge for me is mental fitness. Having a strong sense of resilience, and mental toughness, because that's ultimately what's going to help us to do to do the work every day, to do our training, to show up for our families, to do our job to a high level, is mostly mental. And I'm not sure if this is true, so I want to ask you first. I think you started your military career in 2nd Ranger Battalion. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Massive career at 2nd Ranger Battalion.
Yeah. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because if the story's true, I have a question about it.
Okay, yeah. So yes, I joined the military on a ranger specific contract. I had ran into a an amazing dude in college, and he had just left Third Ranger Battalion. His name was Randy from my hometown, and like when I finally I was thinking I might try to be a pilot, and then I was looking at Army aviation, but I met this guy, and my dad had been a paratrooper, my brother had been a paratrooper. I was like, well, maybe I'll go, you know, roll around in the mud and eat snakes for a little while, and then I'll go be a pilot after I get that out of my system. And then Randy kind of opened up my eyes about Ranger Regiment because this is 1990. This is 1990 and 91, so there was no internets to just let me Google that. So I was gung ho on getting my black beret, and I get to basic. I'm all like, I got a Ranger contract, and then the Ranger LNO shows up a couple weeks in, and these guys who got $5,000 to sign up for infantry and only signed up for like 20. I think there was this 28-month opportunity back then. These guys, so they got a chunk of money, and all they had to do is extend for extend your contract for a year, and you can come to RIP too. I was like, totally messed that up. So anyway, basic training, AIT, jump school, Ranger indoctrination program. All of our RIP instructors had just rotated in. They were all combat vets from Panama, just full of piss and vinegar. And so we had a lot of fun with regard to our RIP experience and getting the smoke. And I was successful, and I went out to Second Ranger Battalion. And about 4 months later, I had an accidental discharge on a range back down at Benning. We were down there for a big multi battalion training event, and then we were going to stay and celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Ranger Regiment. I had an AD on a second battalion level range right in front of an E5 that came up after I finished firing, and was like, "Did you mean for that one round to go off and hit the 50-meter berm?" And I, of course, was like, "Yeah, honesty is the best policy." And I said, "Negative, Sergeant." And he grabbed my M16, and just it became a battalion level event within like minutes, and I got released for standards. Um, so,
Yeah.
of course, as a 21-year-old, I was just like, well, my life's over. I'll finish my 4-year degree, or I'll finish my 4-year commitment, and I guess I'll just go back to college, and the Army will pay for it. And fast forward 4 more months, I'm like, holy cow, this place is amazing. We called it the Ranger Retirement Home because all the kids who did something stupid like me, and I say stupid because my accidental discharge was up and down range. I mean, I literally shot a berm that had a target above it because I was trying to change a magazine because I kept having double feeds. Um, anyway, I didn't follow the proper procedure for that mag change, and I did have an accidental discharge, albeit a safe one. So I did deserve to be kicked out. I got kicked out. I thought my military career was over, and within a few months at LURS, I'm out leading. I'm literally leading 2 and 3 man patrols. I'm winning a competition to get a Ranger School slot. I'm doing some of these things that actually ended up allowing me to go to these international patrolling competitions as a literally a baby in the Army, and it ended up not being the end of my career, obviously, because I stayed for 25 total. But yeah, it made for being a recruiter for the unit. I would go back to Second Ranger Battalion as an E7 or E8 and talk to people that we were trying to recruit for the unit, and I would tell them that story, and their heads would just explode. It was a really, really powerful, like, hey, don't count yourself out story.